Hey, it's Meredith with phoneticfluency.com, where I help you master your pronunciation in English. Today's episode is my first episode of this new podcast. And I guess if you're watching this on YouTube, the main difference that's going to be between like a normal YouTube video and a podcast is that it's going to be unedited, so no like text coming up on the screen or anything like that. It's also going to be something you can listen to audio only, so if you want to look me up on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, and it's going to be a lot more off the cuff. Off the cuff is an English phrase that means like improvised. So I'm not going to be editing or cutting out the small mistakes or slips of tongue that I have. I'm just going to go through it. And yeah, the reason I decided to do this is because as a consumer myself, I don't really watch a lot of short form content. I love long form content. I like watching long YouTube videos and listening to podcasts, especially because I can do that while I'm doing other things, ADHD stuff. So I tend to like really long rambling podcasts so that while I'm doing other things, I don't need to change the episode if it ends. So let me know in the comments, do you like long rambling podcasts or kind of quick, succinct podcasts? That'll be useful for me to know. I'm not saying that today's episode will necessarily be long. We'll see how it shakes out. That's another vocab word, shakes out. If I say, let's see how this episode shakes out, that means let's see how this episode turns out. Let's see how it ends up. So today's episode is going to be about what I would do to improve my English, Spanish, any other language if I only had 15 minutes a day. Or maybe rather than only having 15 minutes a day, if I only had motivation to do 15 minutes a day, what would I do? So I'm going to tell you what I would do. I might be looking down at my phone from time to time to look at my notes. So let's start with kind of the intro, which is it's something that I see all the time. I often see that people waste their time when it comes to language learning with things that are not really going to move the needle. Move the needle means like make an actual difference. So they waste their time with things that don't really move the needle. For example, Duolingo and reading. Don't come for me. That's my controversial language learning opinion. I'll come back to that later. So anyway, if you don't have a lot of time, rather than wasting time with these other things, these are the things that I would do if I only had or only wanted to dedicate 15 minutes a day. So the first thing I would do, and this is like a pre-step, this isn't part of the program, the first thing that you need to do, the first thing I would do if I were in this situation, is put the time on my calendar. I love time blocking. It helps me organize my life. Again, ADHD stuff. If I didn't have a calendar, my life would be a mess. That's the only way that I remember to do anything, essentially. Because, rather than whatever it is taking up space inside my brain of like, oh, I gotta remember. When I put it somewhere else, which in this case is in Google Calendar, now it doesn't have to occupy space in my brain, and I'm able to be very free because I just know that whatever I need to do, it's on the calendar. So the first thing I would do is these 15 minutes that you're going to take to really dedicate yourself to improving your English, improving your whatever language you're learning, put it on the calendar. That is the first thing. You choose what time works for you. It doesn't have to be the same time every day, but just choose every day when you want to do this, because it's really more about consistency than long study sessions. In fact, studying 15 minutes a day doesn't really sound that bad because of what I just said. It's more about consistency than these like very, very long study sessions. I tell my students all the time, you don't need to let it accumulate and do nothing all week and then try to study for an hour on Saturday. It doesn't work that way. In fact, it's kind of the opposite. So now that we have that out of the way, it's on your calendar. The next thing I would do is for 9 minutes out of this 15-minute study time, the first activity I do is 9 minutes of active listening with shadowing. So I'm going to tell you about passive listening first. So if you're listening to me right now, maybe without looking at the video, without watching me, or you just have in your headphones and you're doing something else and you're just listening to my voice, that to me would be passive listening. Because it's something you can do hands-free. You're not doing any kind of like active effort or analysis on your end. So if I were in this very, very quick routine, the 9 minutes of active listening, the difference is I would sit down and put 100% of my attention, or give rather 100% of my attention to whatever it is I'm watching. So for example, if it's a YouTube video, rather than just putting in headphones and leaving the phone somewhere and doing something else, you actually sit down with your computer, phone, laptop, whatever, and watch the video. Maybe not with subtitles. We can talk about subtitles another time, but just really pay attention to the video. So that's the first thing, you're active listening. At the same time, I want you to try to shadow. If you're in the language learning world, you probably already know what shadowing is, but if you don't, just quickly, shadowing is like while you're listening to someone speaking, presumably a native speaker of the language you're trying to learn, you try to imitate them, almost speaking right on top of their voice at the same time as them. So for example, if I am listening to something in Spanish and they're saying, like I'm 1 second, like half of a second behind them saying the same thing as they do. Now, when you do shadowing, for me, shadowing is really good for like intonation and pitch, like where your oral posture needs to be, how you need to sound, how you can sound like a native speaker, more like in the rhythm of your voice rather than the actual accuracy of your words. So that's my view on shadowing. That's what it's most powerful for. So when you're doing your active listening, watching a video or maybe listening to an audiobook or podcast, but actually sitting down, giving 100% of your attention to it, you can do shadowing. So whatever they're saying, say it immediately after them, but not so much focusing on the accuracy of the actual words that leave your mouth, because that's going to actually cause you to get stuck in your head and get tripped up trying to make the words sound accurate. Don't worry about that. Worry instead about your voice following their voice in terms of rhythm and melody. So that's the first part of this one, 9 minutes of active listening with shadowing. Again, no focus on accuracy, focus on rhythm, intonation, and melody. So an example of how I used this in my Spanish learning journey was more than 15 minutes. Usually I would do it like a couple times a week for very long stretches. So whenever I had a really long car drive, because living in the US at the time, you're in the car a lot, I would put on a podcast through my car radio in Spanish. And just that whole time, the topic would usually be interesting, but somehow I wasn't absorbing it that much. Anyway, I would do the shadowing, right? So I would just be speaking on top of them, like 1/2 of a second behind the speaker, trying to match their pauses, when they stretch a syllable, when they pause, when they inflect up, when they inflect down. And I really think this helped me develop a pretty natural kind of Mexican accent in Spanish. So one additional thing you need to do during this 9 minutes is every time you hit a word or idiom or phrase that you don't know, that you're not familiar with, or maybe that you wouldn't use yourself, hit pause really quickly and copy that into another page. I recommend Google Sheets or some kind of a spreadsheet. I'll tell you why in the next step. But anyway, so let's say you're listening to me and you hear me say one of these phrases. What did I say at the beginning? Like, let's see how it shakes out. And you're like, oh, I've never really heard that phrase before, or that idiom, that turn of phrase that she used. Let's see how it shakes out, or like how this thing is going to shake out. So in your active listening, you would quickly pause, go over to your spreadsheet, type that. You can come back later and do the meaning. So that's the final thing for your active listening. Okay, so your 9 minutes of active listening are over. And now 6 minutes, so the remainder of the time, what I would do is use Anki to study. If you don't know about Anki, it's like the best. It's an app. Well, not just a phone app, it's also something you can download on your desktop. And if you're going to set it up for the first time, I do recommend that you download on your desktop first. And it's an open source software, so that means that it's not so straightforward. It's not like you just download it and it's like ready to go. You need to download it and maybe watch a YouTube video about how to set it up, because, okay, let me tell you what it is. Anki is a spaced repetition study application. So the main concept is that they are flashcards. Flashcards. You see one side that says one thing, and then you see the other side, and that's how you study. But the thing that makes Anki so interesting and so powerful and so useful is that it uses spaced repetition. Spaced repetition is this concept where you don't need to review the same vocabulary all the time, right? So I was talking to a Chinese girl the other day, and I was telling her about Anki, and I asked her to tell me a word in Chinese. So I said, what's the word for tree, right? And if I remember correctly, it was shu. right? So I was like, okay, let's imagine that I'm learning Chinese and I'm learning these basic words, right? So the first time you ever tell me this word, I'm gonna remember it, and then I'm gonna forget probably in like, I don't know, like 3 days, right? And then I need to be reminded of that word again. So I remember it because I look it up, or because someone tells me, or because a teacher tells me, or whatever. So then I'm like, okay. And now the next time I forget the word, it's gonna be longer than that first time. It's gonna be, instead of 3 days, maybe I forget it in like a week and a half. And so then I'm reminded again. My teacher, I look it up, whatever. And then after that, instead of a week and a half, maybe next time I last like 3 weeks before I forget the word again. So what Anki does as a flashcard app is it only shows you words based on like spaced repetition. So when you quiz a word, Anki asks you, was this, I'll just pull it up so I can tell you, is this, the first option is again. I remember that. So it's like, okay, again means you didn't understand it at all. Okay. That's my Portuguese study deck. Anyway, so let's say I didn't understand this at all, so I would click again. That means Anki is going to show me this card again today, like within 10 minutes if I study again within 10 minutes. If I choose hard, which means I did eventually get it, but it took me like a while, then I'm going to see it again soon, but not maybe the same day. If I choose good, that means that Anki says, okay, like you remembered it, so I'll show you again soon, depending on like your settings. And if I choose easy, Anki's like, oh, you knew this one really, really well. And so because this is a new card for me, the options are, again, 10 minutes, hard, 12 hours, good, 1 day, easy, 4 days. So because this is something new that I'm learning, Anki's going to show me, again, really, really soon, even if I chose that it was good or easy. Whereas words that have been in my Anki for a very long time, the good or the easy option might be like in 1 year or even 3 years or even 5 years, because Anki, I've already told the app many, many times, I know this word. I don't need to be reminded of it over and over and over because I know it. So that's essentially what spaced repetition is. I was not planning to have such a long definition. In fact, other people could probably explain it better than I did. But this is a huge time saver because apps like Duolingo make you study words over and over and over and over, regardless of how comfortable you feel with this word. Like Anki, for example, when it's a brand new word, it's going to show you according to these intervals of like how frequently you need to see it. And if it's a word that you just know, because it's a very basic word you learned a long, long time ago, it's not going to show you all the time. It's going to show you like once, and then you tell the app that you really, really know this word, and then it's going to be like, okay, you don't need to see this word for 5 years. So Anki is an extremely powerful tool, but as I said, it is an open source software. So like there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that you can edit and like modify on your own. I set up my Anki like, when did I start learning Spanish? 2019, 2020? So like 6 years ago. And I haven't touched it since then. So yeah, the first time you ever install it, you do need to like be on the computer and kind of like play with it and watch a YouTube tutorial about how to do it. But after that, you can leave it alone because I haven't messed with my settings in like 6 years. A lot of people, when they hear about Anki, because I talk to a lot of people about it, they ask me, oh, so it has flashcards on there. It does have shared decks. So for example, the Portuguese deck I'm studying right now, I went on there and like found one that I liked, which was, with English, the word in English, the word in Portuguese, and with an audio to read it out loud to me so that I can get the pronunciation correct. So you can go and find these. If you're listening to this video, you're not a beginner in English, so that means that you probably don't need that. My deck for Spanish is 100% made by me. So every card in there is a card that I created. And that's what I and a lot of people recommend, because these are words that I learned in context. So if I was having a conversation and someone said a word and I'm like, oh, what was that? Then I will write it down or try to remember it, and then I will add that to my Anki set. Sometimes even in the moment, it's really quick to do on my phone, so I can just like click add card, and I can do that in like 3 seconds. So my Anki set for Spanish, for example, is all 100% self-created. That's probably what you'll do for English. So let's go back to our second activity of the activities that I recommend you do in this 15 minutes, or that I would do if I only wanted to study 15 minutes a day, which is studying Anki. So while you were doing your active listening, Maybe you used a spreadsheet like Google Sheets to write down new phrases or new idioms or new words that you didn't know before. So the first part of your Anki study can be just like really quickly writing your Spanish version of that. So like, let's say you wrote down, let's see how it shakes out, right? And so then in the Spanish side, you'll write like, veamos cómo salga, veamos cómo esto va a salir, whatever. And then you can take this spreadsheet and quickly import it into Anki with your new words and phrases. So it's customized to you. And then when you see the card and it says to you like in Spanish first, like vamos a ver cómo sale esto, whatever. And then you flip it and you see, let's see how this shakes out. You'll think, yeah, I remember when I learned that. And so this is really helping you reinforce the learning. So take like a couple seconds to import new things into Anki at the beginning, and then the rest of the 6 minutes is just studying Anki. So for me, this would be a non-negotiable because it was so important for me when I was learning Spanish, because it's like how I really have a strong vocabulary in Spanish. If you have time, this is probably going to push you over 15 minutes, so this wouldn't count for like a 15-minute study. If you had time, I would recommend adding audio files. So whatever you pulled, like, if you pulled that phrase, I've said it 1,000 times now, but if you pulled that phrase, like, let's see how it shakes out, then in a perfect world, if you had all the time to do this and you didn't mind, then you would like take the video source or podcast source and like you can even just use your phone to record it and like record the voice saying that and then add that to your Anki card. Again, this isn't a tutorial about Anki. I do think I should probably make one sometime because I recommend it to so many people. But anyway, you can do that. And then that would be ideal so that you are memorizing these new words, phrases, or idioms with correct pronunciation. So the Anki thing is a study tool, but it would also be an output practice because when you see the first side of the card, you need to say out loud the answer. So you're going to say the answer out loud and then click for it to show you the answer. So you're also getting some little bit of speaking practice in there. So that's the end of your 15 minutes. I want to tell now about bonus passive practice that does not require any additional time. So if I were in this situation where I only wanted to do 15 minutes of practice, that's what I would do. 9 minutes of active listening with shadowing and 6 minutes of Anki practice. In reality, I feel like you could probably do a little bit more and maybe spread it throughout the day. But if you only want to do 15 minutes, that's what I do. But this next part is what I recommend that you do that's not going to add any additional time of like active studying. And the first one is passive listening. You need to be listening to content in English if you want to improve your English, like period. There's no way around this. To me, this seems really obvious because I did this a lot with Spanish. I was like always listening to something in Spanish. I always had like headphones and was listening to some podcast or some audiobook or something in Spanish to create kind of like a virtual immersion because at the time I was still living in the US. And, that's what I was trying to say. It seems kind of obvious to me, but I get the feeling it's actually not because when I talk to my students, they say all the time stuff like, oh yeah, I know I should. So it's like, oh, you don't? Like you don't listen to content in English? And there's so much content out there in English, I have a hard time finding content in Spanish that I would like as much because there's like so many TV shows in English. So if you're not listening to content in English in a passive way, you need to be like headphones on, put a YouTube video on and just set the phone somewhere else. Audiobook, podcast, whatever you want to listen to in English, you need to be doing passive listening in English because straight up, if you want fluency, you have to trade some of your comfort because a lot of students tell me like, I like to listen to music or I already have my podcast I like to listen to in Spanish, whatever. You have to trade some of that comfort food, so to speak, that comfort food input for English auditory input in order to really create fluency. The language doesn't come from inside you, it comes from outside. English already exists and you have to absorb it into your brain and then be able to output. It's not just going to come out of you. You've got to put the input in order for the output to come out. So the best way to do that is through passive listening because you can do it anytime, anywhere. You're driving, you're walking, you're doing dishes. It's a good time to listen to passive English comprehensible input, which is kind of one of the points of this new podcast. So you need to be doing that. That's the first thing of the 2-part section, which does not require any additional minutes of your time. So listening to lots of input in English. And the other one this was also very instrumental for me with my Spanish, is switching your internal monologue to English or whatever language. I'm assuming if you're watching this, you're trying to improve your English. So you need to try to make your internal voice, the voice that's kind of always telling you what you're doing and like what things you need to remember and think about throughout the day, you need to make that be in English. So for two reasons. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. The first one is it helps you change the settings of your brain into English. A lot of people say that they struggle with the switch between English and Spanish. I feel like I really don't. I mean, sometimes like with the mouth muscles, like the actual pronunciation, switching from like an English mouth into a Spanish mouth. But for my brain, it doesn't feel that hard. And I think that's because while I was studying Spanish, I did this particular thing a lot, which is switching my internal monologue to Spanish all the time. The narration that's constantly going on in your mind. So it helps you configure your mind into English, put your brain into English setting, and it also helps you reveal your gaps. So, all right, so, sorry, I was looking at my notes and I got confused. When you configure your mind into English, this is going to help you just in general, like be able to switch back and forth between Spanish and English or, you know, whatever language you are learning in this case. And then, okay, the revealing your gaps part, this is a bonus that's gonna, yes, take a couple of extra seconds of time. So when you're thinking that like internal monologue in your mind, that internal voice that's kind of like always narrating your day, like, okay, well, all right, I'm getting ready. Let me check the time. Okay, it's like 1 o'clock. I need to go ahead and grab my stuff and get it ready by the door so that I can leave on time. This kind of stuff that you're always constantly thinking, it needs to be in English. And then when you come across something and you're like, I don't know how to say that. This is the moment where this does take a little extra time. So if you really are, for some reason, dead set on only spending 15 minutes, you won't have time to do this. But let's say you do, just grab your phone really quickly and open your notes app and just like make a note. So like, I was trying to think in English and I didn't know how to say like, okay, I'm like getting ready and anyway, I need to make coffee, but how do you say the thing that we use to make the coffee? Like, ¿cómo se dice cafetera? Like, and you realize you don't know that in English, just write down in your notes app in your native language, and assuming it's Spanish, right? You just write cafetera. And that's it. Close the app. Then the next time you're doing your active study, where you're getting your Anki ready, you know, like maybe importing new words and phrases that you learned during your active listening, you would just quickly use an app like, or a website rather, like SpanishDictionary.com, or I don't know how to pronounce it. It's like Lingue, like linguee.com. The reason I like that one is because it shows you, or both of the ones that I mentioned is because it shows you in context. So for example, if the thing that you didn't know how to say was more like kind of a phrase or an idiom, which is kind of my main struggle with Spanish, is like sometimes I think of something in English that's like, this is the perfect like little idiom for this situation, and I would love to say something similar in Spanish instead of saying it very literally. So that's what I would write if I were doing this routine. I would write lots of idioms probably. And so then you can use these apps like SpanishDictionary.com or Lingue.com to search them, because then you can see kind of like real life uses, or just use AI, like I use Gemini or, ChatGPT, because then it'll give you like a good equivalent. You just pop that into your spreadsheet, and then the spreadsheet goes into your Anki, and then now you have discovered some of the gaps in your vocabulary of things that you maybe would like to say in English or whatever language you're learning, but you can't say it because you don't know how to say it. So you just, this internal monologue, this internal voice thing being in English helps you discover what are those gaps. So let me try to summarize, because I am a rambler. I do tend to repeat myself and kind of say the same thing in multiple ways. So now I'm gonna try and say it quickly. If I were in a situation where I only had 15 minutes to improve my English or my Spanish or whatever language I'm trying to improve, or I only wanted to dedicate 15 minutes a day, this is what I would do. I would spend 9 minutes doing active listening, where I sit down and give 100% of my attention to the listening act. During the active listening, I would also shadow, and I would pause anytime I hear a word, phrase, or idiom I'm not familiar with, and add this to my spreadsheet. After those 9 minutes, I would spend 6 minutes studying Anki. The first 1 minute of that, I would quickly fill out the other side of my spreadsheet. So if I wrote phrases in Spanish that I wasn't familiar with, I would quickly write their equivalent in English, import that into Anki so that I'm constantly adding new vocabulary, especially vocabulary that I learned in context. And then I would spend the rest of the 6 minutes reviewing my Anki. And when it shows me the English version, before I reveal the answer, I would say the answer in Spanish out loud so that I'm getting a little bit more of output practice. And then finally, the things that add no additional time, the things that I would do more passively, are constantly listening to content in my target language. So if that's English, I'm constantly listening to podcasts or audiobooks or whatever in English, or in Spanish, whatever the case may be. And switching my internal voice, my internal narration, monologue, the configuration of my brain, I'm switching that to my target language so that I'm constantly thinking in that language. And because I am someone who takes the kind of extra effort, every time I think of something, I don't know how to say that, I would quickly take out my phone and add that to my notes app. And then the next time I'm doing my Anki, I would add that thing that I didn't know how to say to my Anki set so that I could study it. So that's it for today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, leave a comment, especially leave a comment letting me know if you like this format. If you like long rambling videos like this one, looks like I'm at 26 minutes now. That's not that long. I could probably go longer. Anyway, if you like long episodes of podcasts, if you like short episodes of podcasts, or whatever you want to tell me. And finally, you can learn more about working with me at phoneticfluency.com, or click the link in the description to get the free pronunciation guide that's going to tell you the main pronunciation struggles that Spanish speakers have when it comes to English pronunciation and how to fix those, along with guided exercises. So that's it. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.